The fire had spread. Across the stars, the coalition grew bolder. Every small strike, every daring ambush, and every unexpected maneuver weakened the Chiron's grip. Worlds that had once bowed in fear now raised banners of resistance. The enemy, once thought invincible, was being forced to fight on too many fronts, and at the heart of this turning tide stood humanity. The gathering storm, the council chamber buzzed with urgency. Reports poured in, Chiron fleets moving, regrouping, preparing something larger than before. The coalition had won many battles, but the war was not yet over. Speaker Tyrrell of the Aeroth spread glowing maps across the central table. The Chirons gather their greatest fleet here at the Rift of Duran. If they break through, they will burn their way to every core world. This is their last gamble. The Trallan chief slammed a fist against the table. Then we meet them head on. Let our strength decide the fate of the stars. The Lixari delegate shivered nervously. It will be a storm too great to survive. Their numbers are endless. Elena Vasquez studied the map in silence. She knew this was it. The final battle. At last she spoke. We cannot stop them by matching strength with strength. But we can stop them by striking where they are weakest, inside their pride. The council leaned forward. She explained. The Chirons believe only in power. They expect us to fight like frightened prey, but if we attack their command ships directly, if we cut off the head, the rest will scatter. They will not understand unity. They will not know how to adapt. The chamber fell quiet. The idea was dangerous. But it was bold, and boldness was something the coalition had learned from humans. At last the Aeroth speaker nodded. Then let this be decided at Duran, one battle, one chance, for all our worlds. Preparing for the endgame, the fleets assembled at the edge of the rift. Ships of every kind filled the void. Massive Trallan war cruisers, elegant Aeroth beam vessels, swarms of Lixari fighters, and human ships small but cunning. For the first time, they did not look like scattered forces. They looked like one. On the Resolute, Elena walked the bridge, her eyes steady, though her heart carried the weight of billions. Lieutenant Harris leaned close. Captain, are we ready? Elena gave a small smile. We are never ready for battles like this, but we are ready to fight. Her words spread across comms as a final message. We fight not for one world, but for all. We fight not because we are strong, but because we refuse to surrender. Let this be the day the galaxy remembers. Fear does not rule us. Hope does. Across the fleets, warriors, pilots, and commanders felt the fire of those words. Even the most fearful among them straightened with new courage. The Battle of Duran the Rift was a storm of broken light, a field of shifting gravity and burning gases. Out of that storm, the Chiron fleet emerged, vast, endless, their ships like black spears blotting out the stars. At the center loomed the Chiron command carrier, a fortress larger than cities. The coalition charged. Trallan warships roared ahead, smashing into the Chiron vanguard with heavy cannon fire. Aeroth vessels flanked wide, lancing beams into enemy lines. Lixari fighters swirled in clouds, harassing and confusing enemy pilots. And through the chaos, human ships darted like sparks, weaving between massive hulls, striking at weak points, never where the enemy expected. The Chirons roared their defiance, their deep voices echoing across comms. Crush them. Show them true power. But the coalition did not break. The human plan, the key, was the command carrier. Destroying it would not only cripple the fleet, but also shatter the Chiron's will. Elena's voice came calm and sharp across the Allied network. All ships form the path. The Resolute will lead the strike. The Trallan understood first. With furious pride, they slammed their ships into formation, shielding the smaller vessels from enemy fire. Go, spark bearers! We will hold the wall. The Aeroth opened precise corridors with their beams, cutting swaths through enemy shields. The Lixari swarms darted in to cover blind spots, protecting the human ships from ambush. Together, they carved a narrow road through the sea of war. The Resolute and its squadron raced forward, every alarm blaring, hull rattling under the storm of fire. Elena gripped the command rail. Steady, this is what we came for. Into the heart of the beast. The command carrier towered ahead, bristling with weapons. Shields flared, cannons roared, and the void itself seemed to shake. But the coalition pressed on. Human torpedoes struck weak points in the shields. Aeroth beams widened the cracks. Lixari fighters streaked inside. drawing fire away, and then with one final push, the Resolute dove beneath the carrier's belly, unleashing a storm of explosives at its reactor vents. The enemy flagship shuddered. Light burst from its sides. A scream echoed across Chiron comms. Disbelief, rage, fear. Moments later, the carrier erupted in fire, breaking apart into 1,000 glowing shards. Across the battlefield, the Chiron fleet faltered. Their lines wavered. Their roars turned to silence. And then, as if a chain had snapped, they fled. The invincible had been broken. A galaxy awakens. When the smoke cleared, the coalition stood victorious. The stars above Duran burned bright with wreckage and triumph. For the first time in living memory, the Chirons had been defeated not in one battle but in spirit. On the Resolute's bridge, cheers broke out. Harris laughed and shouted, "We did it! By the stars, we actually did it!" Elena simply breathed deeply, her gaze on the drifting ruins of the command carrier. "No," she said softly. "We did it. All of us. Together. Recognition." The Coalition Council gathered weeks later to honor the victory. For once there was no argument, no fear. Only pride. Speaker Tyrell spoke first. "The galaxy will remember this day as the day the Chirons were broken. But it will also remember how, through unity born from the courage of humanity." The Trallan chief raised his weapon high. "The Spark-Bearers showed us how to fight with more than strength. They showed us how to fight with heart." The Lixari delegate clicked in agreement. "Where we saw only fear, humans saw fire. We honor them." Elena, standing with her crew, shook her head. "Do not honor humans alone. Honor the coalition. One flame cannot light a galaxy, but many flames together can drive away any darkness." Her words drew thunderous applause from every corner of the chamber. The human spark lives on in the years that followed. The coalition became more than a wartime alliance. Trade flowed, cultures shared knowledge, and walls between species slowly crumbled. Humanity, once dismissed as reckless, was now seen as the symbol of courage. Children across worlds told stories of the spark-bearers who turned fear into fire. Songs were sung, monuments raised, not just for humans, but for all who had fought side by side. And though Elena Vasquez never called herself a hero, history would remember her as one. For when the galaxy faced its darkest night, it was humanity's spark that lit the dawn. The wreckage of the battle still drifted across the Helios belt, glowing faintly in the starlight. Shattered hulls spun silently, their twisted frames a grim reminder of the price of survival. For the coalition, the fight had been brutal, but it had also been proof. Proof that the Chirons could be resisted, proof that unity was possible, and at the heart of that proof stood humanity. A new reputation. On the council station, stories spread quickly. Everywhere Elena Vasquez walked, alien officers whispered and stared. Once humans had been dismissed as reckless dreamers. Now they were spoken of with respect. The Lixari called them shields with hearts of fire. The Trallan named them the daring kin. Even the cautious Aeroth admitted that humans had become the glue holding the fragile coalition together. But with respect came expectation. The next move was vital. The Chairons had retreated, but they were far from defeated. Everyone knew they would come back stronger. The council gathered once more in the great chamber. Voices argued back and forth. "We cannot fight another battle like this," warned the Aeroth speaker Tyrell. "Our losses were too high." "We must prepare defenses," roared the Trallan chief. "Fortify every system." "We must hide," hissed the Lixari delegate, her antennae trembling. "Scatter before the storm returns." Amid the chaos, Elena stood silently, watching. She understood the fear. The battle had given hope, yes, but also scars. Fear still coiled around their thoughts. When the voices grew too loud, she spoke. "Friends, the Chirons expect us to stay afraid. That is why they will lose." The room fell silent again. The human idea, Elena's words were simple. We cannot match the Chirons in numbers, but we don't need to. Humans have always survived by thinking differently. Where stronger enemies built bigger walls, we dug tunnels. Where larger armies marched in rows, we struck from the shadows. We turned weakness into strength. Some aliens tilted their heads confused. She continued. The Chirons fight like a hammer, heavy, direct, crushing. We must fight like fire, spreading fast, unpredictable, impossible to contain. If they expect us to defend one system, we will strike 3 others. If they march in a straight line, we will twist sideways. We must fight on our terms, not theirs. The Lixari delegate clicked thoughtfully. You mean, a war of movement? A war of deception? Elena nodded. Yes, a spark can start a fire if you know where to place it. Humanity can be that spark, but only if we fight together. Training the coalition, the plan was risky, but the council agreed. Over the next weeks, human officers spread across the Allied fleets. They did not give commands, they gave ideas. In one training exercise, humans taught the Trallan to feint retreat, something their proud culture had never considered. The Trallan first resisted, growling that retreat was dishonor, but when they saw how it lured enemy ships into a trap, their roars turned into laughter. With the Lixari, humans practiced swarm tactics. Small Lixari ships, guided by human patterns, darted around larger vessels like wasps. What once looked like chaos now struck with precision. Even the Aeroth, masters of logic, found themselves surprised. Human officers challenged them to impossible scenarios, teaching them to adapt instead of calculating endlessly. At first, the Aeroth scoffed, but soon their sleek ships learned to bend rules of strategy in ways they never had before. Everywhere, the same lesson spread. Courage mixed with creativity could outmatch raw strength. A test of fire. The true test came sooner than expected. Scouts reported a Chiron supply convoy moving near the edge of Coalition space. Normally, no one would dare attack. It was escorted by heavy cruisers. But this time, the Coalition saw an opportunity. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elena briefed the fleet commanders. If we strike here, we don't just win a skirmish. We cut their fuel, their weapons, their food. Without supplies, their fleet slows. And more important, we show the galaxy that the Chirons can bleed. The Trallan chief grinned, his teeth sharp. At last, an attack worthy of warriors. The Lixari delegate twitched nervously. It is dangerous. Everything is dangerous, Elena replied. The question is, will it matter? This will matter. The plan was approved. The coalition would fight not to defend, but to strike first. Ambush in the void. The convoy glided through deep space, unaware of the trap. Chiron ships kept tight formation, confident in their strength. Then, shadows moved. From an asteroid field emerged Trallan warships, firing heavy blasts that forced the convoy into tighter lines. From behind the asteroids, Lixari swarms darted out, stinging at the convoy's edges. Aroth ships unleashed long-range beams cutting through weakened shields. And then the humans made their move. The Resolute and her squadron burst from hyperspace directly behind the convoy. Before the Chirons could react, torpedoes struck their fuel carriers. Explosions tore through the line, scattering the fleet in confusion. What is happening? Barked a Chiron officer. They fight differently, another growled. The spark ignites. The battle lasted only minutes. The coalition, moving with speed and precision, destroyed the convoy entirely. Supplies burned, escorts fled, and the wreckage drifted across the stars. For the first time, the Chirons did not look invincible. When news spread, entire worlds lit with hope. Civilians who had once hidden now spoke openly of resistance. Colonies that had considered surrender now pledged to fight. The phrase, the human spark, began to travel from star to star. In marketplaces, in schools, in command rooms, aliens whispered, the humans lit the fire. Bonds in battle after the ambush, coalition crews gathered to celebrate. Trallan warriors slammed their fists on tables in triumph. Lixari clicked their claws in rhythm, their version of applause. Aeroth gave respectful nods. In the middle of it all, Elena simply raised a glass of water and said, "This is just the beginning." Lieutenant Harris leaned toward her. "Do you realize what's happening, Captain? They're not just following us. They're changing because of us." Elena watched the aliens laugh and cheer together. "No," she said softly. "They're remembering who they really are. We only gave them a spark. The fire is theirs now." The enemy's fear far away in the heart of the Chiron fleet, their supreme commander listened to the reports. First the dreadnought destroyed, now a supply convoy lost. He slammed a clawed hand against the table. Who are these humans? Why do they burn brighter than the others? No one answered. But the silence itself was dangerous. For the first time, even the Chirons felt a shadow of doubt. A fire spreading, the coalition did not rest. With each small victory, their confidence grew. They struck again and again, supply lines, isolated ships, outposts. Each time the humans guided the strategy, but every species added their own strength. The galaxy began to watch. Distant worlds, once silent, now spoke of the coalition as a force of hope, and always at the center of every story was the same truth. Humans had turned fear into fire. The spark had been lit, and nothing could put it out. The weeks passed quickly. What had once been only a fragile agreement was now taking shape as a real fighting force. The fleets of different worlds trained together day after day near the council station, learning how to fly as one. Still, fear lingered. The Chiron Empire was approaching, and every report made them sound more unstoppable. Rumors said their ships carried weapons that could melt shields in seconds. Some whispered that the Chirons enslaved entire populations, turning survivors into tools of war. Whether true or not, the fear alone was powerful. The coalition's ships trained, but many leaders still doubted, and soon, doubt would be tested in the fire of battle. The alarm had happened suddenly. A sharp alarm cut through the council station's calm corridors. Red lights flashed, and the intercom voice repeated the same chilling words. Enemy fleet detected. The Chiron Empire is here. On the station's observation deck, Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display. Red markers filled the screen, dozens, then hundreds. The Chiron fleet was larger than even the darkest rumors. Their warships were shaped like jagged blades, each one radiating menace. Lieutenant Harris whispered, "There are so many." Elena's face was calm, but her hands tightened on the railing. "Then we'll meet them." Across the station, alien crews rushed to their ships. The Trallin growled orders to their warriors, eager for the fight but afraid of the odds. The Lixari hissed prayers in their own tongue. The Aeroth, always calm and logical, calculated survival rates that were far too low. And yet, they launched. First contact, the battle began at the edge of the Helios belt. The Chirons advanced in tight formation, their ships cold and silent like a wall of iron. The coalition fleet spread out, each race flying in their own style at first, Trallin charging ahead, Lixari darting sideways, Aroth holding back. It nearly collapsed immediately. Chiron weapons flashed, beams of red fire cutting into the Trallin ships. One cruiser exploded in seconds, and the rest faltered. The Lixari scattered in panic, and the Aroth fell further behind. On the human flagship Resolute, alarms blared. Harris turned to Elena. "They're breaking apart. We can't hold like this." Elena's eyes burned with determination. "Signal them. Tell them to fall back behind us. We'll hold the line." Standing at the back, the human ships surged forward, not to attack but to cover. Their shields lit up as Chiron fire struck them, but they held their formation. Through the comms, Elena's voice reached the other fleets. "We promise to guard your backs. Trust us now. Fall into formation, Trallin to the center, Lixari on the flanks, Aroth for support fire. We'll cover the retreat." For a moment, the aliens hesitated. Then slowly they began to listen. The Trallin warships pulled back into the protective shell of the human line. Lixari vessels darted to the sides, weaving between human frigates. The Aeroth aligned their sleek ships at the rear, preparing long-range strikes. The Chirons pushed harder, but now the coalition bent without breaking. The human ships absorbed the first fury of the storm, their smaller hulls shaking but not shattering. On the bridge of the Resolute, Harris muttered, "Our shields won't last forever." "They don't need to," Elena replied. "Just long enough for them to remember they are not alone." A new formation. The battle shifted. With the humans holding steady, the Trallin regained their courage. Their heavy cannons thundered, sending blasts of energy into the Chiron front line. The Lixari began to strike like daggers, cutting into weak points and darting away before the enemy could retaliate. The Aroth provided calm, precise support, their beams slicing through the gaps created by others. For the first time, the coalition fought like one. On the alien comms, voices shouted encouragement. A Trallin warrior roared, "Stand firm!" "The humans guard us, we will not fall," a Lixari pilot hissed. "The promise is real. Strike with them." The Chirons, expecting an easy slaughter, found themselves slowed. Their wall of iron now met resistance, the human gamble. But the humans knew they could not only defend. If they stayed still, the Chirons would grind them down. Elena needed to break the enemy's rhythm. "Harris," she said, "prepare maneuver Delta 7. His eyes widened. "That's suicide if it fails." "It won't fail," Elena said firmly. The human fleet suddenly split in two, leaving a narrow gap. The Chirons surged forward to exploit it, only to find the Lixari rushing in from the sides, striking at exposed engines. At the same time, Trallan cannons blasted the enemy ships that slowed to help. The Aeroth poured fire into the heart of the chaos. It was not a full victory, but it was a wound. Several Chiron ships exploded, their flaming hulls breaking the perfect wall of their formation. On every coalition comm, cheers erupted. The Chirons could be hurt. The turning point, the battle raged on for hours. Coalition ships burned, but they did not break. Humans continued to shield the others, taking hits meant for their allies. Their smaller frigates were torn apart one by one, but every sacrifice bought time for the others to strike back harder. And then it happened. A massive Chiron dreadnought moved forward, intending to crush the coalition with a single devastating blow. Its cannons glowed red, charging for a shot that could annihilate half the fleet. On the Resolute, Elena's eyes locked on the readings.
If that cannon fires, we're finished. What do we do?
Harris asked, fear in his voice. Elena's answer was calm. We stand at their back. The Resolute and 3 other human ships broke formation and charged directly at the dreadnought. Enemy fire hammered them, tearing through their shields, but they did not stop. At the last moment, the Resolute launched every torpedo it had straight into the cannon's core. The explosion lit the void like a newborn star. The dreadnought shuddered, broke apart, and died in flames. The coalition watched in stunned silence. A weapon they thought invincible had been destroyed, not by numbers, not by technology, but by human daring. Hope rekindled, the tide of battle shifted. With the dreadnought gone, the coalition pressed harder. Trallan roars filled the comms, Lixari wings darted faster, and Aeroth beams grew sharper. The Chirons, once certain of victory, began to retreat. When the last enemy ship jumped to warp, the coalition fleet floated among wreckage and fire. They were bruised, bloodied, and broken, but alive, and for the first time, victorious. On the Resolute, Harris sat back in his chair, stunned. We actually stopped them. Elena, weary but steady, looked at the battered ships of every species around them. No, she corrected softly. We reminded them how to stop themselves. Aftermath, the news spread like wildfire. Across the Helios belt, species who had once hidden in fear now spoke of the battle. They spoke of how humans had kept their promise, standing in front of enemy fire to protect allies. They spoke of the daring strike that destroyed the dreadnought, and everywhere, a new phrase began to rise. To have humans at your back is to never stand alone. For the first time in living memory, the Chiron Empire had been stopped. And though the war was far from over, the galaxy had found its turning point. The Council's decision spread quickly across the Helios belt. For the first time in many years, the smaller worlds dared to think of resistance. Yet doubt still lingered in their minds. The Chiron Empire was vast, with fleets that blotted out the stars. Could fragile ships from young worlds truly stand against them? The Council Chamber had agreed to form a united fleet, but unity on paper was far easier than unity in battle. Many alien leaders returned to their homeworlds uneasy, unsure if they had made the right choice. On the human side, however, the decision was final. Humanity would stand with the coalition, whether the others trusted them or not. A captain's words inside the docking ring of the orbital station, Captain Elena Vasquez gathered her officers. The humans wore simple uniforms marked with the blue and green crest of Earth. Their ships, though fewer in number, were sleek and practical, built for speed and adaptability rather than sheer firepower. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena began, her voice calm but strong, you've all heard the Council's doubts. Some of them think humans are reckless. Some think we're weak. Others think we're fools. That doesn't matter. What matters is what we promised. Her officers stood in a circle around her. Lieutenant Harris frowned. They don't even believe we can help them. What if they don't fight when the time comes? Then we'll fight anyway, Elena said simply. But I believe they will. Someone just needs to remind them why they must not break. The group nodded. For humans, this was not the first time their courage had been tested. Alien doubts on the council station. Other delegates spoke in private chambers. The Trallan chief muttered to his advisors, humans speak boldly, but their fleets are small. How can they protect us? The Lixari delegate twitched her antennae. They believe in symbols. They think standing behind us will change the war. But wars are not won with symbols. They are won with ships, weapons, and numbers. Even the Aeroth speaker Tyrell remained uncertain. And yet, he admitted, there was power in her words. I have not seen such conviction in years. The aliens did not know it yet, but the very thing they mocked, the human need for meaning, for hope, was the key they had lost. The assembly a week later, a gathering was held in the station's grand hall. Delegates, officers, and even civilian observers filled the room. The coalition needed a single voice to address them all. Many expected the Aroth speaker to speak first. Instead, it was Captain Elena who stepped forward. The hall quieted as her image appeared on the holo display. She did not wear armor or medals, only her plain Navy uniform. "Friends," she began, her voice clear, "you are afraid. I know this because humans are afraid too. Fear is not weakness, it is proof that we understand the danger. But fear becomes weakness when it controls us." She paced slowly, looking at the faces of dozens of species. "The Chiron Empire wants you to believe you are already defeated. That is why they send their threats. That is why they burn worlds before the battle is even fought. They want you to bow before you even stand." A murmur spread across the hall, but Elena lifted her hand. "Humans have known enemies like this before. On Earth we faced conquerors, tyrants, empires. Many times we were told we could not win. But we did not fight alone. We fought beside allies who believed in us. That is why we are here now." She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower, stronger. "We are not asking to lead. We are not asking you to trust us with command. We are asking for something simpler. Let us stand at your back. Let us take the blow when your shields falter. Let us give you the chance to rise again when you fall. That is humanity's promise." The hall was silent for a moment. Then slowly the Lixari delegate tapped her claws together. "And if you fail?" she asked. Elena did not hesitate. "Then we fail together. But we will not abandon you. That I promise." A spark of belief, the words struck deeper than anyone expected. The Aroth, who valued logic over emotion, found themselves unsettled by the passion in her tone. The Trallin, proud and warlike, saw courage where they had expected only empty talk. Even the Lixari, cautious and distrustful, felt a flicker of something they had not felt in years. Hope. After the assembly, groups of aliens whispered in the corridors. Some were still doubtful, but others began to imagine the possibility of standing against the Chirons and surviving. The phrase "the human promise" began to spread among them, repeated in different tongues, carrying different meanings but always with the same weight. Preparing the fleets in orbit above the council station, ships from different worlds began to arrive. The sight was both inspiring and chaotic. Trallan warships were heavy and angular, built like floating fortresses. Lixari vessels glittered with crystal hulls, delicate but sharp. Aroth ships were long and sleek, designed for efficiency. And among them moved the human frigates and cruisers, smaller but fast, bristling with unusual weapon arrays. At first, the alien fleets did not trust one another. Their formations were sloppy, and their commanders argued over every maneuver. But then the humans offered something unexpected: training. Human officers volunteered to coordinate drills, not by giving orders, but by suggesting patterns that emphasized cooperation. "If you fly here, the Trallan cannons can cover you," explained a human tactician to a Lixari pilot. "If you move your ships this way, our shields can extend farther." Slowly, the fleets began to adapt. Day by day, their coordination improved. For the first time, alien ships flew in formation, covering one another instead of competing for space. Testing the promise one night, Elena stood on the bridge of her ship, the Resolute. Through the viewport, she watched the combined fleet maneuver around the station. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Lieutenant Harris joined her. "They're listening to us more than I expected," he admitted. "They're not listening to us," Elena corrected gently. "They're listening to themselves. They just needed someone to remind them they could." Harris smiled faintly. "You really believe we can stand against the Chirons?" Elena looked out at the distant stars. Somewhere beyond, she knew the enemy fleet was already preparing. "I believe in the promise," she said. "Not because it's easy, but because it's the only choice we have. When you stand for someone else, you find strength you didn't know you had. That is what will save us." A shadow on the horizon far away, beyond the edges of the Helios belt, the Chiron fleet continued its slow march. Their warships were vast, dark shapes against the void, engines glowing red like embers. The Chiron commander studied reports of the coalition's gathering with cold amusement. "Let them gather," he said. "The more ships in one place, the more glorious the fire when we burn them." The war drums of the Empire were beating. Soon they would reach the Helios belt, But this time the coalition was no longer fractured. They had a promise to keep, and at their back stood humanity, small, underestimated, but unyielding. And in the silent dark, hope began to burn brighter than fear. The stars of the Helios belt glowed softly against the dark void, scattered like grains of diamond dust. Space had always seemed endless, but now it felt very small. The Chiron Empire was on the move again. Their fleets of steel-gray warships cut through the silence of the galaxy. And every world they visited ended the same way: surrender or destruction. For years, the smaller civilizations of this sector had tried to remain neutral. The Trallan, the Aeroth, the Lixari, all proud peoples, believed their distance from the major trade routes would keep them safe. But distance meant nothing to the Chirons. At the center of this crisis sat the Council of Worlds, a large station orbiting a pale blue star. Dozens of delegates had gathered inside its grand chamber. Tall, spindly Aeroth stood beside heavy-scaled Trallan, and insectoid Lixari chittered nervously with their antennae twitching. Every seat was filled except for one, the human delegation. Many aliens whispered about the humans. They were still newcomers, only joining interstellar politics 2 decades ago. Most races considered them young, rash, and too unpredictable to rely on. Some even mocked them for their small fleets and lack of advanced technology. When the heavy doors slid open, the whispers grew louder. Captain Elena Vasquez walked in, followed by 2 human aides. She wore a simple Navy uniform with no decorations, only the crest of Earth on her shoulder. Unlike many alien leaders who wrapped themselves in jewelry, robes, or armor, Elena carried nothing but a datapad. The council speaker, a tall Aeroth with pale green skin, narrowed his eyes. "You are late, human." Elena gave a small smile. "Better late than never, Speaker Tyrell. I prefer to arrive after the arguments have softened. That way I can hear clearly what is at stake." A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. Humans were known for speaking boldly, sometimes even disrespectfully. Tyrell's lips tightened, but he allowed her to continue. The Lixari delegate clicked her mandibles. "The Chiron Empire demands we surrender our mining worlds. If we refuse, their fleet will arrive in less than 30 cycles. We cannot resist them." "Then we must negotiate," rumbled the Trallan chief, his deep voice echoing like rolling thunder. His thick claws scratched against the table. "Better to bend than to break." "No," snapped another delegate, wings quivering. "If we surrender one system, they will come for another. There will be no end." The chamber fell into chaos. Voices rose, claws banged, antennae twitched. Everyone spoke at once, fear and anger mixing into one storm. Elena stood silently for a while, watching. Humans were often underestimated because of their numbers, their technology, or their late arrival on the galactic stage. But what most aliens failed to understand was that humanity had spent thousands of years learning to survive not in comfort, but in conflict. Humans had faced wars, famine, disease, disasters, and somehow they had endured. Finally, Elena raised her voice. It was not loud, but it carried a strange strength. "You are all arguing as if the question is whether you will lose. You have already decided you are too weak. That is the real danger." Dozens of alien eyes turned toward her. Some looked offended, others curious. Elena stepped forward. "The Chirons are strong, yes. But strength is not only about numbers or weapons. It is about will. They want you to fear them, to break apart before the first shot is fired. That is their strategy." The Trallan chief snorted. "And what would humans do, Captain? You have only a handful of fleets. You are outnumbered 100 to 1. A slow smile touched Elena's lips. "We would stand behind you." The chamber went quiet. Even the chittering of the Lixari fell still. "What do you mean?" asked the Aeroth speaker, suspicion in his tone. Elena looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every species. "Humans do not claim to lead you. We do not demand you trust us with command. But if you choose to fight, then humanity will guard your backs. Our fleets will move in formation with yours. Our soldiers will fight beside yours. And when the Chirons strike, they will not face divided worlds. They will face a united wall of resistance with humanity standing firmly at its heart." Some aliens exchanged doubtful glances. To them, it sounded like bravery mixed with foolishness. The Lixari delegate tilted her head. "Why would humans do this? You gain nothing. The Chirons have not threatened your homeworld directly." Elena's eyes softened. "Because humans remember what it feels like to be alone against a stronger enemy. We remember the centuries when empires crushed smaller nations, when the strong preyed on the weak. Every page of our history tells the same lesson. Only together can we endure. If humanity walks away from this, we will be betraying not just you but ourselves. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Even the skeptical Trallon seemed shaken. The Aroth speaker leaned forward. "And if we refuse your help?" Elena shrugged. "Then humans will still prepare. We will fight the Chirons alone if we must, but I would rather fight beside friends than as martyrs." For a moment no one spoke. The council chamber hung in stillness like the breath before a storm. Then slowly the Lixari delegate raised one claw. "Perhaps humans are right. Fear has already poisoned us. If they are willing to stand at our backs, maybe we can find the courage to stand at the front." One by one, more voices joined. The Trallon chief growled his agreement, though reluctantly. Even the Aroth speaker could not ignore the shift in the room. The council, for the first time in years, began to move toward unity. As the meeting ended, Elena walked back through the heavy doors. Her aide, a young lieutenant named Harris, whispered, "Do you think they'll truly accept us, Captain?" Elena glanced back at the chamber, where alien leaders still argued, but now with less despair. "They don't need to accept us, Harris. They just need to believe that someone will not abandon them. That is enough." Outside, the stars of the Helios belt still glowed, silent and cold. Somewhere beyond, the Chiron fleet was already preparing its engines, hungering for conquest. But for the first time, the galaxy was preparing to push back. And behind them all, humanity stood ready.